Show me the money, show me the cars, show me the action, what's happening.
This is Ecotopia on KZFR 90.1 in Chico. I'm Susan Tchudi. My co-host is Stephen Tchudi. And tonight we have two city council members here, Bryce Goldstein from District 7 and Addison Winslow from District 4. And I just want you to know that we did invite all of the city council members to come to Ecotopia tonight. And three of them let us know that they were out of town. Casey Reynolds and Tom Van Overbeck and Katie Hawley are all out of town. The other two declined to respond to my email at all. So we have Bryce and Addison. And what we wanted to do tonight is to talk about the city's accomplishments in 2025 and a little bit of heads up about where things seem to be going or priorities that city council members have for 2026. And we're going to start at the beginning. Do you want to start at the beginning?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you became city councilors. You're both now, they regularly talk about the two liberals out of three on the council. How did you get into this? When did you decide to run? And then we'll get into more of what you've accomplished on the council. Bryce, you want to start?
Oh, sure. So I've been on the city council for just over a year now. I was elected in November of 2024, got sworn in December. So I am basically entering my second official year as a city council member of my 4-year term. I had been involved in local politics, environmental causes, housing justice, and other related causes for quite some time. I've lived in Chico for over 9 years now, and even my first job in Chico was at the city working on climate action plan implementation. So I've been up to all of these things for so long, including being on the Butte Environmental Council Board, where I kind of got to know the Tchudis and other good folks in the community. And people had mentioned that maybe I should run for city council if I have all these opinions on such important things like our climate action plan, urban forest master plan, housing element. So I served on the planning commission for 4 years and then the climate action commission for a couple of years, and eventually decided finally to run.
Okay,
Yay.
So you're by no means a newbie on the council in terms of being familiar with affairs in the city. Goes way back.
Yeah, I've been very familiar with the workings of the city and our community for a long time now. Being on the inside as a council member is a bit different, and so I am a little newer to that, definitely, than to my colleague Addison.
And where is District 7, please?
I consider it to be South Chico. It's a little bit of a funky shaped district, as they all are, thanks to political motivations in drawing our district boundaries. But District 7 includes the Barber neighborhood, Chapman Town, areas kind of in the North Chapman Town, 8th and 9th Street corridor, like Eastwood Park. And then it goes eastwards out on East 8th Street through some kind of suburban areas, and then it hooks down through Merriam Park, and then a little bit of the suburban areas just north of Bidwell Park. So it's kind of weird on that side of the freeway.
I just want to say, you were running against an incumbent, and I don't think that anybody ever thought you weren't up to the task, but it was possible that she could have won. Why did you win?
Well, let's see. The odds were, to be fair, stacked in my favor a little bit to start off with, but I also ran a really solid campaign with a lot of community support. I had a great campaign manager. Shout out to Erin, my campaign manager. She also plays drums in my band. We actually played on KZFR a couple of weeks ago. That was
nice.
Fun. So having a really good team behind me, as well as a lot of community support. And I don't think I would have decided to run if I didn't have so many people encouraging me to do it, who then helped knock doors, helped make art and flyers and mailers, sign postcards, things like that. So a lot of community support. I also think that there's an element of the tides kind of turning politically. In 2020, when that district had previously been up for a vote, I would say there were similar, it was a similar district. But unfortunately, our progressive candidate, Rich Ober, didn't win at that time. And I think that's in large part because in 2020, people were really isolated. People were arguing with each other on the internet, buying into these things that maybe they didn't actually investigate in real life with homelessness or pandemic issues and things. And I think people voted in a full sweep of right-wing city council members at that time and then saw that they didn't live up to the promises that they had about supposedly solving homelessness and improving quality of life in Chico. So I think we saw a little bit of a turn in the political pendulum.
Addison?
Addison.
How'd you get here? And Addison is you're into your fourth year now, right? Or almost. You're entering
this
your
is my fourth year on the city council.
On the city council. And for a long time was the lone progressive on the city council. How'd you get there, and how's it been?
Yeah, the newspaper called me the lone liberal, and I never would have considered myself a liberal per se. And I think my entry into local government was probably a little unorthodox. I didn't have a college degree or anything, and really I had spent a lot of time living in some other cities and got involved with like activist groups. And when the Camp Fire happened, I was living in Montreal working on a community land trust, and we had put on a conference on community control of land and housing. And so I had these interests in things that were policy related. And when the Camp Fire happened, I kind of had this, I could foresee how that would impact the city of Chico, and especially a lot of the lower income people who were struggling to access housing before the fire. And it's exactly what transpired. I mean, there was a mass wave of evictions. The rents were raised across the board. And I thought that I would come back to Chico. I had lived in these big cities. I lived in Mexico City for a bit, and I saw myself maybe being more present in those places. But I love the hometown that I grew up in, so it was wonderful to be here. And there's so many things I loved about it. I saw it as sort of a pivotal moment, so I should be here at least for a little bit to work in the aftermath of the fire and some relief efforts or something, and got involved in advocacy around tenants' rights and that issue in particular. And there was sort of a snowball effect that the pandemic happened. I started working on some other things, got involved in environmental activism, in particular around the Valley's Edge project, and then Butte Environmental Council later hired me to work on the housing elements, like housing plans for the city. And so I ended up just getting like deep dives into these different areas of policy, and enjoyed getting into like the weeds and things like that. And I think people saw that I had a ability to wrap my head around some of these nuanced policy issues. And so it's sort of the snowball effect that eventually I found myself surrounded by people that were telling me that I should run for this seat that's open. And there didn't seem to be too many other viable candidates, at least that were thirsting for it. I think it was a really contentious time in politics. I still hear people say they're afraid to participate in politics because of the kind of attacks that you get. And I wasn't sure how that was going to be when I ran for office, but once it happened and I found that, I was like, this is the best that people throw at you. I think some of the attacks starting off with like, well, he's a likable guy, but, and then they'll make up some stuff and say, I want to let homeless people camp outside and stuff. And that's kind of the typical thing that has been thrown out and has been successful for the right wing in a lot of cases. And just felt like it didn't stick very well. And so I've enjoyed, I enjoy the controversy around it a little bit. I enjoy the, being able to go do a deep dive into policy issues, both work like across the aisle on things, but also like stand up for what I believe in. So there's a lot of issues in here that in this town, and a lot of people that need to be stood up for, and we haven't had like an organized ability to do that. And I think that we've, in contrast to previous liberals that have had councils in the past, I think that we've stepped up like the grassroots organizing on in our campaigns, and I think that's allowed us to kind of overcome this like really dramatic inequalities in terms of like the money and politics and such, to win some of these campaigns and come really close to winning the council overall. But really, it's a bit of an uphill battle given the way that maps are drawn out.
So and we can talk about this in either order. What were your priorities when you came into the council? You said, okay, I remember one of your huge campaign slogans was no more potholes.
Tough on potholes, to be specific. Yeah. Yeah, so one of my priorities was definitely better funding for our infrastructure, especially our roads. That's continuing to be a bit of a uphill battle, perhaps a bumpy, pothole-filled uphill battle. The main thing that I believe we need to do is just budget responsibly. And we once again failed to do that as a council. This past budget hearing in May and June, the right-wing city council members who say that they are fiscally conservative made a decision at the last minute to pull funding out of our roads fund and move it into funding firefighter positions. And of course, we need to make sure that our fire department is well staffed, but it's a fine balance between all of our divisions in the city, and people have been complaining about the lack of roadway infrastructure funding for so long that we passed Measure H, the local sales tax, basically to backfill that gap. I mean, we have potholes all over our city, roads that are falling apart. We need safer infrastructure for walking and biking. It's pretty clear that that was a haphazard decision to make last minute, and I, of course, voted against that. And in a recent meeting, I also I made the argument that when we experience some surplus in our budget, that we should make sure that that funding goes towards our roads. Once again, a 4-3 vote against doing it. So I'm going to continue this fight. I may not win yet, but I will continue with this promise of trying at least to be tough on potholes.
Well, go ahead.
What percentage of the pothole money at the moment comes from Measure H as opposed to regular city funds?
Ooh, Addison might be able to correct me on this one, but I'm going to say 100% right now because our Measure H funding is kind of limited. It's being spread through a lot of different things. But do you happen to know, is general fund going towards?
I mean, the money that we get specifically from the state for road maintenance, that stuff out of the gas tax and such, goes towards it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, virtually nothing else. We put it all into salaries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what were your priorities coming in? And I mean, I watched you a lot the first couple of years. Well,
as
all
seen on
3
TV,
years,
Councilmember.
because it seemed so hard. What were your priorities, and how did you negotiate those relationships?
Well, I mean,
I have to say one more thing about this. I loved watching you sitting next to Sean because you would always just kind of laugh.
I'm gonna break your microphone.
There's
just roll with it.
I used to say it's like, you know, people are like, how do you get by in this? Like, I would be so miserable there, and it's like, well, you got to have low expectations as far as actually winning votes, you know, and then a sense of humor. So yeah, some comic relief, lots of comic relief.
Good dating advice too.
Yeah, and. So me getting into city council, I have interest in a wide range of things. It would probably be boring to list them all, but in a campaign, you try to boil things down into certain issues. And so the ones that I picked were more housing and working on promoting housing, particularly affordable housing for people that need it, less sprawl, and then better neighborhoods. And you could say for all, which was sort of a catch-all for other issues, and like focusing in particular on the neighborhood plans that we had for places like the Avenues or for Barber, Southwest Chico, that called in particular for traffic calming, slower streets that are more comfortable for people to walk outside, but also a well-managed tree canopy and stuff. And so there's a lot of things you can put under that. But when it comes to more housing and less sprawl, I was looking for opportunities immediately to make some progress on this, and one of the first meetings I had was the Valley's Edge hearing. And that's where I could say that I was on the council by myself, but I wasn't by myself because the room was full, the spillover room was full, and we ran a referendum after that. And so even though I was a 1 no vote on there, we ended up successfully gathering more signatures than anybody has in the history of Chico. And in spite of me being in maybe the most adversarial circumstances anybody's ever entered a city council in Chico on, we still overturned one of the most important votes that took place in that. So there's a bit less sprawl as a result of that. But also as a result, and this is you can credit our friend Sean Morgan to a certain extent, having a sense of reality that when they lost the referendum, he said, well, we have to work out something to make sure this doesn't happen again, meaning that even though we have all the votes we need to pass anything on the council right now, we still need to negotiate with this guy. So we created an ad hoc committee on growth and community development, where I was able to pick a couple people from the smart growth community, and we had some agreement on developers to participate in the committee, which even one of the Valley's Edge developers was on there, me and Tom Van Overbeck. And we did a pretty exhaustive series of meetings looking at housing policy, like in depth. What are the barriers that we have towards housing? How are we able to meet our plans, or how are we failing to meet the plans that we set out in the last general plan that was adopted in 2011? And how do we address these things? And so we drew up sort of a pretty general list of reforms that we want to see, and we're actively walking through these reforms. So on the more housing side, I think we've made more progress than I think has been made in a really long time, and not things that are just forced by the state, which is how a lot of previous reforms went, but these are things that we're actually opting to take actions, which is overwhelmingly to benefit infill. And the goal being to make people satisfied enough with the style development that's happening that, one, we're meeting our goals, we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we're making the city more affordable and more walkable for people, but in such a way that we don't feel like there is this like popular resentment towards the style development that's happening at the higher level, and that we have more agreement in the community. And it's been really successful, I think, so far. But these are all things that still have to be they're not quite written in stone yet. It's not in the law, and there still is the opportunity for, I think, some pressure to come on certain council members that might lead us to either water down these things or reverse them entirely. And so these, as with anything in a democracy, it's still a work in progress. But I think that we're on the right track, given the kind of place that we started, the place that I started when I got into the council.
I want to follow up on that in a minute, but I want to ask you about how the Butte Environmental Council hired you to do a bit of the housing element, which is required. It is a part of the general plan, and we have to, Chico has to meet certain expectations in doing the housing element. And you were hired to do a deep dive into what's possible with housing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the way that happened was there were some people in the community who had sort of pressured Butte Environmental Council's executive director at the time and the board into taking some action on the housing element, seeing that this is a process, cities adopting this new housing element, they were working on it. I had, for months by that point, gotten really obsessively into this housing element cycle statewide, because in the last, it's every 8 years that you have a new housing element. And in the last few years, the state legislature had adopted a ton of new laws pertaining to production of low-income housing, and really trying to stop what has been a long-standing tendency of local governments and local communities trying to prevent low-income housing from coming in. And so they were reversing that and requiring cities to do a lot of things, either to change their zoning laws entirely or just to really better substantiate the case they have that they actually can produce low-income housing that they're targeted to produce. And not just have, there were some cases of places being like, oh, you can build low-income housing on that wetland, knowing that it is physically impossible for that to ever happen. And they were really being more strict on it, right? So I was reading the letters that were going out by, in particular, a group called Abundant Housing LA to all the jurisdictions in the LA area, many of which were formed specifically to exclude low-income people from their communities. So these were the most skillful governments at avoiding fulfilling any low-income housing responsibilities. And this was a pro-housing organization in the LA area with a bunch of lawyers that were writing letters describing how the cities were trying to subvert these laws. And I was seeing that the state was largely siding with this group in these letters. And I was seeing a lot of things they were doing, and I was like, oh, Chico's doing that too. Or I can see this going on in Oroville a little bit like this. And so whenever there was some pressure on Butte Environmental Council to try to do some advocacy on it, I was called in to explain what do we think we can do. And I said, well, if I can spend some time going through all this, then I can write letters that will go to the state, and it will essentially do their homework for them in describing how the city's not meeting these requirements, and they'll require us to implement some reforms. And that's exactly what happened. And actually, it was the day before I was sworn into the council, the Housing Community Development Department of California wrote a letter citing the letter that I wrote, shooting down Chico's housing element and saying you needed to adopt all these revisions. So I would argue almost for a while there, it was the most influential thing I've done on the city council. Actually was before I got into the city council. It was literally the day before that letter was sent out. And it was in sort of a weird way, and this is, if you want in the details of some of the struggles that we face or I have faced with the city, this wasn't given to council members. I actually only figured this out. The first time I saw it was a letter that Legal Services of Northern California, the local tenant nonprofit who's well known for suing the city around homelessness, they sent a letter on our housing element, and they cited HCD's letter shooting down the city's housing element. That's the only reason that I knew that it had gone on. I went and looked it up in their own database and found it. The city staff never told us about this, never asked for the council input on it. And there was a sort of a tense exchanges between me and the city manager and some other staff members about us having access to that and us having a discussion on how we're actually going to resolve some of these issues, because they were trying to do it at the staff level when it's like, really, these are major questions of public interest, and we should be discussing these things. At that time, the council wouldn't support me having anything on the agenda. Like, I brought up 6 things to discuss on my first day on the council. 5 out of 6 of them didn't even receive a second, and the other one failed by a 3-4 vote. And the first thing that I was able to get on an agenda was discussing applying for a pro-housing designation, which was sort of a way for us to discuss some of these pro-housing policies. And this is also a way that I've kind of gotten to the point where we've given direction and staff has been. The elements of our planning department division that want to support more pro-housing policies have been emboldened, and they've been coming up with their own ideas and such. And Chica's been pursuing some really good things on that side.
Nice.
I wonder if you could clarify for us, what is affordable housing by definition or in fact?
Well,
and who can't afford housing?
Yeah, it depends on exactly the circumstances. When it comes to an affordable housing project, it can be affordable to certain groups based on area median income, and that's said generally our area is Butte County. So Chico's actually, the median income, Chico's going to be higher than the area median income because we're the higher income area over Oroville and some of the rural areas around us. In this case, you look at it's like 30% of area median income, 60%, and they'll categorize you as low income, very low income, moderate income. And you have to, when you provide housing for those groups, it does look at the cost to provide it. And when it comes to low income, very low income housing, that's almost all subsidized. I mean, the government is paying for rents to be lower because the cost of production is not such that you can make that work. You can get moderate income housing if you design projects to be low cost and if things work out fortuitously for them. But there are a lot of things that add the cost of housing, and a lot of that is government regulations and just limited availability for land for lower cost housing, because we tend to zone most of the land we have available for low density housing, quarter acre lots and such.
Good, thank you.
I'm going to come back to that too, but last week you and Tom Van Overbeck had opinion pieces in the Enterprise Record highlighting an ongoing discussion for both of you, increasing the vitality of downtown. How is that going? What are some ideas? I know that there was just a kind of, this is actually for both of you. I mean, you had the article about Bryce is obviously involved in all of this. What ideas are viable and strong right now?
Cool.
For revitalizing downtown. Well, first we could give the summary of where that project is at. So there recently was a community meeting located downtown. The city basically had this open house style workshop, 3 different days where community members could stop in and see these very large poster diagrams of different designs that are being proposed for downtown. And for those not familiar with this project, it basically stemmed from the need to tear up our downtown streets to replace utilities in the near future. We have a bunch of 100-year-old sewer pipes that need replacement, and we can take that opportunity to apply for state grant funds to make our downtown safer for people walking and biking. We can rework our sidewalks to make them wider, maybe put more street trees, figure out the vehicle loading situation that people might be afraid will tie up traffic, and balancing all of those needs with the voices of our community on bike parking, vehicle parking, things like that. So this project called the Downtown Revitalization Project has been going on for a while. There's been a few different community meetings on it, and so that's where we are at is the city's engineers and our consultants have proposed some potential designs and sought community feedback on them. And I hope some of our listeners went to that meeting and voiced their input. I really enjoy the fact that we're looking at having a bikeway through downtown so that we can connect from the new bike path on the Esplanade down to Park Avenue and South Chico in my district. Hopefully making that intersection down by the co-op a lot safer for walking and biking over at 8th and 9th Street all the way down to 11th Street. And there are designs proposed for that.
So there have been a lot of false starts in the city revitalization project. So what do you see as what can possibly go forward that will work? Are the designs now ones that you think are everyone will agree to, or?
Well, there are a few different designs. And I think as we filter them through to find kind of a draft final design, there's always going to be disagreement because everybody has slightly different needs, slightly different viewpoints. You know, I want my streets to be particularly walkable and bikeable, making sure that people can drive through and park where they need to park and that people with disabilities have access and balancing all these needs. But there are a lot of people, especially business owners downtown, who are really concerned about making sure that people can park right in front of their business and prioritize that over things like bike lanes that initially could have removed some parking. I think our engineering division is weighing the parking need while also making sure that there's room for bike lanes. So I think we can get an outcome that theoretically includes everybody's asks. We have pretty wide streets downtown. We'll see if everybody feels that their asks and their needs are being weighed enough.
How soon will that be resolved and we begin digging up the streets?
Digging up the streets and doing this, probably still a few years at least down the line. I mean, which is also good because we want to do this right.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple things that like stand in the way, and one is having political support for it, and looking at us voting on it, which could happen in the next year. I mean, the designs are there. We could give direction anytime we really wanted to. We had alternatives in front of us, which are not very dissimilar from the ones that are presented now. Well, there's more details worked out on the ones now. For example, like how to solve the delivery truck issue, you know, and it's it's detailed in there now, and it was just kind of a concept before. But there was an alternative that didn't lose any parking, had bike lanes all the way through, and I think it would have been fine for the council to approve that conceptually, at least at that point. We would have applied then for the active transportation grant, where we're likely to get, or we're hoping to get, many millions of dollars to fund the majority of this project. But we need to have a case that's going to get us that grant money. So Tom Van Overbeck, he participated in the early stage of this. Actually, this was something that he and I put forward basically together. We have something we agreed upon as revitalizing downtown and making streets safer and slowing traffic through downtown. But he's since had some legal issues about owning property downtown and voting on it. So he's actually not able to vote on this. So even though he had the editorial in, he consulted with his Fair Political Practices Commission attorney, who said that it was okay for him to write that as a citizen, but he doesn't expect to participate in the vote. So if you were to look at strictly partisan lines, we're looking at a 3-3 council on this due to that recusal. So in order to have a majority, somebody else needs to all agree. And I can't say that like this is a strictly partisan issue. Like people have different wants and needs. I will say that when it comes to the general attitude towards things is we talk about safety, and we've really I think especially since Katie and Bryce have been on the council, we have elevated discussions of traffic safety, safe streets, to the status of being public safety. Well, even though it was like the most likely way you'd die a violent death in Chico is getting hit by a car in a car accident or something, and this is true across the country, but it was kind of considered as sort of a side thing, and we've always focused the needs of cars since after World War II, since the streetcar was taken out in 1947, right before the 3 lanes were put in each direction. We have emphasized the needs of cars, and we've had traffic engineers like running the city on that. And now I think we're looking at things differently, and in a similar way to where like the pro-housing instincts of some people in planning have been elevated and encouraged to like run with that. The safe streets elements within our engineering department are now working more, and they're coming to the top, and they're proposing better designs. And I think that we're generally on the same page with our engineers for this project. But it does mean that we need to sometimes subordinate other needs. Tom, for example, given he won't be voting on this, but his opinion and where he and I diverge on this is that parking is so important. It's more important than safety on the streets. So he says that bikes could be, or anything else in the protected lanes, could be relegated to these side streets. And I tell him, it's like, well, you got 9 intersections between 1st and 9th that those are the most dangerous places in there. And so even if you had protected bike lanes there, that you can't be protected in the intersection, and they're not signalized. So that would be the risk of being hit the entire way through there. We can't install traffic lights there. That would be 1, tremendously expensive, 2, super inconvenient to cars going through there to have to deal with all these extra traffic lights. I think that bicycle infrastructure needs to be on Main and Broadway, and I think that's an important element to emphasize. It doesn't have to come at the expense of parking. If we did find that, really it's the convenience of parking, there is more parking around the corner. Always it's that core block that really gets taken up. We could have better design, I think, in terms of the accessibility for walking and biking. But it's not even necessary. Really, everything everybody says they want, except for the 3 lanes downtown, that's not possible to maintain and have really any other benefits. We can't widen sidewalks. We can't add bike lanes. We can't do any of the things we'd like to see downtown if we maintained 3 lanes. And that's the only thing I think really needs to be given up. But we have to have a compelling design to the people at the state who are going to issue the funding, or we're going to be struggling to pay for this project, which is to say either we're not going to pay for it, or it's going to mean other projects are getting postponed for a long time because we haven't been willing to make the tough decisions that would get us that state money.
So is there a particular deadline for that, for getting state money? I mean, is there a...
I think it's in the summer.
Yeah, it's usually a summertime deadline. I don't know if it's this summer or if it's going to be the following summer.
No, I think we missed the 2024 deadline because the council did not make a decision on this. We
All right,
punted.
then we must be coming up on
so I believe it's 2026 in the summer. Yeah, I think June.
All right. I'll fact check
You've
that later.
been, both of you have been very involved in the Safe Streets Coalition. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how that's affected your work on the council and how you've been.
Sure. So the Chico Safe Streets Coalition is a group of community members that I've been involved in since we started, I'd say probably 4 years ago now. And we're focused on advocating for traffic safety in Chico, primarily for people walking, biking, using mobility devices, things like that. And this group started because of the Caltrans Highway 32 rehabilitation project, which about 4 years ago was kind of in its formative phases, and Caltrans was doing public outreach, which actually just meant they had a completed plan, and they held a couple of workshop open houses where they said, here's what we're doing, deal with it, which is a classic highway department thing to do.
You're rolling your eyes when you say that.
Yeah.
Visual radio.
I don't even notice when I do that sometimes, so I appreciate you telling me. But yeah, I mean, Caltrans was started as the highway division for the state, and they have brought us such things as, freeways through urban communities that displaced a lot of people. And so now the aim of investment in our state highway system is supposed to be multimodal, not so much increasing vehicle traffic. There are still in urban and, connecting communities, areas, projects being funded that expand highways, maybe more in the form of like auxiliary lanes to reduce merging. I'm kind of going on a tangent because I work in transportation planning, and I have some gripes about where our funding goes. So most of our transportation funding is going to highway projects to move cars more efficiently, and only a very small amount of money goes to things like walking and biking projects. So the downtown project, we are going to have to compete hard to get funding for that. Like, we're going to have to show that this project will be transformative, and it's going to really improve safety and really be amazing, because so many good projects are not being funded because there is just not enough money to go around throughout the state for these projects. So that ties into complete streets advocacy through the Chico Safe Streets Coalition. The Caltrans Highway 32 project was a great opportunity for Caltrans to reevaluate Nord Avenue, Walnut Street, and 8th and 9th Street through the heart of our community, through neighborhoods, through student areas where students are crossing to go shopping or go to school. They could have made these streets way safer, way better for people walking and biking. I mean, the university has parking impaction problems where students want to be able to drive to school and they can't, but they live less than a mile from the university. They could be walking and biking. I wouldn't want to if I had to cross Walnut Street and risk getting hit by a car. I wouldn't want my kid, if I had a kid living over at the zoo, to have to walk and risk getting hit by a car. So we lost this opportunity because the state doesn't plan for their highways to actually serve their communities well. And we as a city lost an opportunity because that's the state funding a project. That's something where we wouldn't have had to put our local limited funds towards putting better crossings, better sidewalks, things like that. The state could have done it. So even at the time, Mayor Andrew Coolidge did sign off on a letter led by Safe Streets Coalition to say, we need bikeways, we need safer crossings with pedestrian islands, we need better sidewalks on this corridor to make it safer for walking and biking. And Caltrans said, no, we already know what we're doing. So what we're ending up with is a few better crossings and like a few new sidewalks, but they're not fixing the sidewalk gap around the corner from my house that extends for about half a mile from Poplar Street to Highway 99. They're not putting a sidewalk there.
It's crazy to spend over $30 million on a project and not fill in a sidewalk gap in a like major urban area.
My neighbors walk their dog there, and we have people biking on this highway. Like, if I want to go from my house to the co-op, I can walk or bike through the muddy alleyway, or I can go on the sidewalk that has like light poles and such, like in the middle of the sidewalk, and maybe ride my bike on that. There's no bike infrastructure, even though it's basically downtown. So we kind of lost that battle. I could go on about it, but point is, Chico Safe Streets Coalition formed from us being upset about this basically waste of funds by not investing in our community. And then we've also advocated on other efforts, particularly providing input on this Downtown Complete Streets project, which became the Downtown Revitalization Project. And also members of this coalition have commented on other things like the park roads or the West Ave's Access project that Addison and Katie spearheaded. So it's a good local group. If you want to get involved, maybe reach out to KZFR. I can try to add some folks to our email list. We're always looking for more folks to get involved.
Yeah, I think it's critical because the opportunity's there. Because of Measure 8, the sales tax, we have money for projects. And now that the sort of the political winds on this have shifted a little bit, it's been subtle, but having two other council members who are very much committed to that, having Tom who has a general commitment to this, and the others who maybe have a more ambiguous kind of position on project to project, but they seem to like to roll with it, talking about Safe Streets. So it's had a lot of sway. It's changed since I've been on the council, the attitude towards Safe Streets projects in general, and whether something is seen as all just for a small proportion of bicyclists as opposed to for everybody's comfort on the streets, for general safety, for cars not speeding and driving through houses like they have on First Avenue in a number of cases, breaking gas pipes and shutting down the whole elementary schools, and even coordinating with Caltrans. When we were talking about this downtown project initially, it was just me on the council, and I managed to talk to Andrew Coolidge. It's like we have some coffee, talk about it, and get through a letter that I wrote to Caltrans asking them to coordinate with us in that intersection at 8th Street, just recognizing that there's been fatal collisions there a number of times, and it's a key part of our downtown and making our downtown safe. It's it has to incorporate them, and we want them to work more collaboratively with us, given that they were already putting tens of millions of dollars into a project on those streets. And there was sort of a groaning acceptance of doing that at the time. But now I feel like it's the attitude is totally different towards it. And so whenever Katie and I wanted to push a Safe Streets project in our districts in Warner Street and West Sacramento, it was just consensus on the council, yeah, we're doing this. We just wrote up a plan. Wow. We drew it out. We said, here's where we want it to go. Here's what we can do. And it was accepted. Little update on that is that we, the engineers proposed that we apply for grants to do a much more expensive and sophisticated version of what we are proposing. We were looking at a cheap, quick build kind of thing that just gets people some space to safely ride bikes to school. And they're we can kind of tear up the whole street and we can put in some stuff. We can actually save the parking that way, which we were willing to give up a lane of parking in order to give safe bicycling access to Chico High School. And we applied for a grant, a federal grant for safe routes to school. We didn't get it. This was news as of just a couple days ago. And so we're going to have to look at, well, we go back
Breaking
to
news
a
on Ecotopia.
quick build project. But if this was, if it was a different council, if it was before, I would feel like, okay, maybe this project's dead in the water. We're not going to be able to get the support to take away some parking to make this happen. And now I kind of feel like, well, we need to go figure out exactly what we're going to do, but we're going to do something. We can't just leave that the way that it is, because it's completely unsafe for people to get to high school, for people to get to the college. This is the highest density area in the city, in the North State, and we got to do better. And I feel like there is the support on the council now to do better.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, but the details are often worked out in little committees and internal affairs, and people like Chico Safe Streets Coalition showing up has a major impact in that. And every single project that comes up is an opportunity to do a new, more or less transformative project to expand the networks and make streets safer in general. And it matters for people to show up.
Do you get feedback from businesses that are not in the downtown about the focus on downtown? I'm thinking particularly of 20th Street, East Avenue, a lot of businesses out there. And I can imagine people saying, why focus on the downtown, which is a lot of places shuttered up at the moment.
Well, hey, we repaved East Avenue since I've been on the council. We would have repaved
And
East
Park.
20th Street, but we took the money away from it. Well, four votes took the money away from it earlier this year, but that's still on the docket. I think maybe it's happening next year then. Yeah, I mean,
You're not ignoring the rest of the
no,
city.
no,
is what
I don't
you're
think.
saying.
I think they have different expectations than downtown. You know, downtown has a lot more foot traffic. People park and then they walk around downtown, and this isn't so much the case for strip mall areas along East Avenue. Would love to look at some kind of transformative projects for other areas in town. Look at the mall as a place where we could build some like higher density housing on parking lots and just create a completely different environment than what was built there in the era of suburban sprawl. But the business owners aren't exactly asking for that, and until they do, until some other people do, then I think we're probably going to be focusing when it comes to safe streets more on downtown.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I haven't heard a whole lot from the community about focusing on other areas. Most of the other areas of the community are focused on the same issues as downtown in some ways, like homelessness, traffic safety, etc. But downtown, most people recognize it's the heart of the community. And yeah, the fact that it's walkable, we need to maintain that. And I would love to make more areas of the city perhaps have like a hub area that's walkable for shopping. But until people are asking for that, it's not really going to be the priority. I have heard some business owners talk about how they wish there were more opportunities for economic development elsewhere in the city. I don't know exactly what that would look like. But one business owner had brought up, in city contracting, making sure to contract locally to support businesses in Chico. And so that's something that we need to keep an eye out for opportunities for that. But as for infrastructure, I haven't heard too much community feedback on changing that priority from downtown.
To be real, if you want to break it down dollar for dollar, it is the case now and has been the case for a long time, probably more so previously because we haven't been here looking at these things. The infrastructure dollars that we pulled, whether it's from the federal government, the state government, or local dollars, has gone overwhelmingly towards the areas on the outskirts of town.
Okay.
These major arterials. It costs a lot more money to reconstruct Bruce Road than it would to fix some sidewalks in the core of the city. The central neighborhoods have been overwhelmingly neglected in terms of tax dollars, and there's more tax dollars coming out of these areas in large part. New areas generate more tax revenue right now. People pay higher property taxes if you've just acquired your property or if it's newly built. But even when we apply for, like in recent years, there's been community project funding through Congressman Doug Lamalva's office, part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And so we're able to put in asks for money, and he might fund it, basically. And the projects that we apply for on that is like widening Cohasset Road from Eaton Road to the airport. So talk about other like economic opportunities. The whole idea there is like, well, the airport industrial park can grow a lot. We can have pass-through air service. We don't, but we could. And so we'll just widen the road out there. Bruce Road, we pulled one of the largest, that was the largest project by dollars in Chico's history. And we put in a lot of general fund dollars in addition to the state money that came in to support that. And whenever it comes to applying for new funding, I set up a staff meeting to discuss that. What are we asking for? Because I would just see this kind of pop up. They look at widening Highway 32 from El Monte to Bruce Road. They even wanted to prep the intersection there so that we will widen that, just anticipating we have to have these like more lanes on the roads on the outskirts. And that is just adding lanes to a road on the outskirts of town is so much more expensive than just fixing some of the potholes in the core of the city. That we do consistently shift a lot more money in there. So when we talk about this downtown project, there's a lot more interest because it actually does, I think, matter more to more people. But also we're looking at pulling state money for it. That's the only way that it becomes possible to imagine this sort of thing. And I think, with West Sacramento and Warner Street putting in protected bike lanes there, it's a similar thing where the idea is it's like, well, we don't necessarily have general fund dollars to do this, so maybe we can do this in a way that the state will fund it or the federal government will fund it. And when that doesn't happen, it's sort of this question of, well, maybe we just won't do the project at all. And we're trying to find a happy medium where we do some really low cost interventions, where we set up kind of like cheap redesigning of the street that is more like temporary to test this out before we do a full reconstruction. But when it comes to the major public works engineering projects, they're happening on the outskirts of town. That's just been the case for a long time. We support new growth over the old neighborhoods. And before we had district elections, there wasn't specifically representation for old neighborhoods. And I'll tell you, this is part of the reason why this has been the case for so long.
We're going to run out of time if we don't get to
I have
other issues.
Oh, wow. Well, you did list when you were writing to me about accomplishments, a number of things that you think have happened that have improved in the city in your tenure and probably even in your tenure.
Especially the last year, I'll say.
Yeah. Highlight some of the good things that have happened. I mean, you've already done some of that with the progress we're making on safe streets and projects.
Yep.
Okay. Well, first getting myself and Katie Hawley elected,
right.
I think I was told by a lot of people that was a really good thing, and also a nice, bright, shining light on a bad election of 2024. So I feel personally like I'm still kind of growing in my role, and I haven't been the one to spearhead a lot of good things, and it's still a little bit difficult with the current council majority, but it's great to reflect with Addison on what things looked like before we had more numbers on the council. So being able to elevate good causes like safe streets, that's been really my priority, and I think we're getting places with that. Addison and Tom Van Overbeck's work with the committee on community growth and development, your recommendations that were brought forward, I'm very excited for what can be done with the ways we can update our code to allow for smart growth and density. That's exciting to me. What are some other ones you've got, Addison?
A major one, and this was it's one of those things. Some of the stuff happens like in back rooms. You got to talk to staff. You got to kind of push something, and there's no like formal vote, but it takes some energy and a little bit of like an impetus. And one of the things when I got on the council, we had this concept of a community choice aggregation, and this is to be not like super descriptive and get boring. Maybe I would love to just talk about this for hours, but this is a way of having a public company that sources electricity separate from PG&E. So even though we're still using their distribution lines, we're able to kind of divest from them in a way and look at other sources of more renewable energy, but also cheaper energy. We're not paying off their profits and all the other expenses that PG&E has that a public company wouldn't have. That was just sitting gathering dust because back in like 2018, early 2019, staff had sort of determined, and this is with the county working on what was called Butte Choice Energy at the time, and they're like, well, it doesn't quite pencil out because PG&E is able to set the rates we have to pay in order to shift into this. So they had blocked us out. There hadn't been a single community choice aggregation that had formed since before 2018. And so I went and talked to our public works director about it. I'm like, where is this? I found that the person who's working on the county had become Oroville's city manager. And so they kind of we lost the people who had momentum on this. And it was just sitting there gathering dust. And we well, now's the time to let's shake it off and relook at it. And now it's not effective until October 2027 because there's a legal process going through to join these. But now Butte County, Oroville, and Chico, we're all joining Pioneer Community Energy. And so we're going to have lower electricity rates as a result of that. We're going to be more invested in renewables. I think there's more things we could do in that regard, but that's been a significant piece of progress that we've gone. We formally made the motion to join that and will. Another thing that came up recently, Katie Hawley brought up, she lives in an area where there's a bunch of dark spots. And to shed some light on that, we had a discussion on streetlights, and we're looking at making some more like strategic interventions in areas that are lacking in this sort of thing. That it's just gone for decades. Since maybe the city ever inherited these areas from when they were developed in the county initially, we've just never looked at the quality of the streetscape and put in these improvements. So we've been able to identify some of those areas, and we're going to be adding some streetlights into places that really need it, so people can feel like they can walk safely outside, which is a huge thing for roughly half or more of the community. That we also had a discussion on street sweeping. This is something that I brought up, seeing that there's some issues with it, areas where they're so parked out that the street sweeper can't even get on the side of the road. And this is, it's a cleanliness thing. Of course, we would like to have clean streets just for aesthetic value, but it's really about stormwater quality. This goes off into the creeks, and it pollutes the creeks. There's stuff that comes out of your automobiles that if it makes it in there, it will kill life downstream. And so we're looking at improving the quality of that. Another issue that was kind of tied in, similar but distinct from that, is leaf pickup. For a long time, we have a very simple system of leaf pickup. It's a complicated task that our workers are super good at, getting in there around parked cars and getting all the leaves, and everybody sees that because they go all over town. But they would start in one area of town and just proceed counterclockwise in a circle. The problem is that we have some areas like bike lanes in town that are like super high frequency, like Warner Street. You got all these people going to college there, riding bikes very frequently because there's not enough parking out there. Or ones like Forest Avenue, where there's very high speed traffic alongside it. And so if people have to veer out of the way because there's a big pile of leaves, like they're at risk of dying. And so we said, it's like, well, we can do our counterclockwise rotation around the city, but when there are these areas that deserve a higher priority, we should divert to go and take care of those places. And that was direction that we gave. It was a 7-0 vote. And so we're looking at updating these things. The leaf pickup thing, it's like that is a fact that we have that priority. It still does require us to make sure that staff's aware of what areas are kind of obstructed by leaves. And so community input, and that's always welcome. Send it in when you see like piles of leaves that shouldn't be there. And for street sweeping, we're looking at reworking that schedule, in particular in areas like South Campus that's very heavily parked out. We will be implementing some rules to make sure that we can actually get in there and sweep the streets like we haven't been able to in a long time.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Thanks to the support of our fellow council member Tom Van Overbeck, I'm on the Butte County Association of Governments board, which has been great for me because BCAG, Butte County Association of Governments, runs our transit system, the B line, and they also do planning for interregional connectivity and such. So there's a study that's being updated for bus service to Sacramento, and I'm not going to take credit for that concept. It's been, kind of under development on and off for a long time, but I think that with a council and representatives who are supportive of transit and knowing that interregional connectivity is important for our economic growth, as well as just like getting people to Sacramento and to the airport. I think that we could see a lot of progress on that study. Hopefully in the next year, we're going to have that interregional bus with several trips per day. And I'm very excited about that.
That's great.
Yeah, we're really trying to work on getting we're in like a multi-year effort of trying to just like eliminate the bureaucratic limitations that what prevents us from being able to buy a bus only ticket for the existing buses that run to Sacramento. We got to buy a ticket to Davis, and then you just hop off and don't get on the train and stay in Sacramento. And yeah, I've been pushing that for a long time. It is disappointing how slow things work sometimes. But now with this bus study, we're kind of looking at seeing what we can do to pull us a more efficient route to the Sacramento airport, because that's a really key thing to all of us. It is just it's a fact of living here, that experience we all have of the 3-hour round trip to drop off a friend at the airport, or to have somebody come and pick you up and drop you off.
Yep.
And it doesn't make sense from any standpoint. It's a burden on society as a whole around here. It means more greenhouse gas emissions if you're doing it. It's a tremendously higher cost if you do end up parking, as I believe. Well, I don't want to out her. I think Katie Hawley, she's visiting home in Southern California, and I think she just parked her car the whole time, which means she's paying the parking rate that entire time. And if she would have asked one of us, we probably would have dropped her off. But
or some people buy like $100 Uber each way instead of paying the parking.
Yeah,
fee.
people actually do that. Yeah, the $100. Yeah, Derek's done that.
100% do.
I mean, it's a huge cost in society, and we just need to work out. And in this case, there's Yuba Sutter counties, they're sort of separate from us because they're in the Sacramento Area Association of
Right.
Governments, and we need to be working with some public officials from that area in order to coordinate on the transit to get us there, because we share that transit market with them. We'd be picking up the same passengers. They need to get at the airport. We need to get at the airport. It's worse for us not having the access, but and we're going down to meet with the county supervisor down there, who's hopefully
We are
will help us in
truly,
that
truly
effort.
out of time.
Yeah.
It is 5:58, so we have 2 minutes. I just want to let people know that our guests have been Addison Winslow, council member from District 4, and Bryce Goldstein, council member from District 7, describing really the wonderful work that, I learned so much from hearing you all talk about the kinds of things that you've been working on. Going to the city council meetings isn't quite enough to get the lowdown.
Yeah.
So,
Most of my interviews have been about the bad things, so it is nice,
Oh,
refreshing
yeah,
to come on and
it's
talk about
good.
things that have been good over the
Yeah.
last few years, the
Yeah.
progress that's been made or is being made.
so eventually, or in the future perhaps, Tom said, oh yeah, I'd like to be on your show sometime. So maybe in the
Oh,
future.
that'll be fun. Yeah, we should
I've
get
had
him
a
on
lot
here.
of
We could all chat.
experiences with.
Anytime. Tom and I sit down and talk all the time.
You-
Tom never turns down interviews. I can't say this for all the council members, but
Right.
but Tom and I have done multi-hour just sit-down interviews before. You can find them online.
So, yeah, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for all the good news and for all the I know it's really hard work. So,
Well, thank you
so
too.
much.
This
Yeah.
has been really nice, and thanks for doing programming on KZFR, because I did this in the past, and it's hard to wrangle people, and including people like me who don't respond to their emails promptly
Yeah.
all the time.
And all the people that have been listening, that have been supporting us on the council, you know who you are, and thank you very much for all that.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
do 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 do